Dodge Media Productions is a proud sponsor of Xpose Hope, a 501c3 organization dedicated to showing the members of the adult entertainment industry that regardless of where they are at, they are cared for. Xpose Hope provides gifts, resources, and time to individuals without judgment. Dodge Media Productions is committed to helping Xpose Hope to reach their goals of ending trafficking. You can support their efforts by donating today. Follow the link in the show notes.
You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. This is episode 137, my all-time favorite movie.
Of all time.
The year was 1990. I was a year out of high school. Went with a girlfriend to see this new actress that I had already previously discovered in Satisfaction and Mystic Pizza.
Mystic Pizza, right?
Already had a girl crush on her. Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman.
That's
right.
all you can say.
That's all I can say.
So we watched this one for free on an Xfinity stream, which was a bit of a bummer because they edited out one of the most awesome scenes. So I would not. It would have been worth it for us to pay the $4 to see the actual version.
But even if you see a real version, you can go on YouTube and see the scene we're talking about, where one of my favorite comedians and dear personal friend Larry Miller is the manager at the store, and it is absolutely wondrous. You're a powerful and sexy man. I knew that the moment you walked in here. Like, it was just absolutely wonderful. His performance as the obsequious, butt-kissing, anything for a dollar. It was so good. Why did they cut that?
I have no clue.
Someone from FX needs to answer.
Yes. So Garry Marshall, actually, I think Julia Roberts was attached to this film. It was called 3000. It was written by J.F. Lawton, who also did Pizza Man in 91. Do you remember that movie?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't think I saw it.
I'm not talking about the porn version. 92's Under Siege and 95's Hunted and 96 Chain Reaction. He wrote all of those.
I definitely saw Under Siege, if that's the one with Steven Seagal that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So he wrote this film. It was called 3000, and it was very dark. It was more realistic about the seediness of sex work and probably Hollywood Boulevard and the activities that, the illegal activities that took place downtown LA. So
he was probably writing this mid to late 80s, and I think Hollywood Boulevard was a little sketchy back then.
Yes. So he wrote that, and she was attached because she was really a nobody. She had done this little film, Mystic Pizza. Okay, whatever.
Right.
Wasn't a huge hit. She didn't get a ton of buzz. So she was attached, and they couldn't find anybody to direct it. Whoever had it before, Disney got it. And Disney was like, okay, Garry, you direct this movie. And she was like, I went from having a job to not having a job. But the casting director liked her so much, told Garry, you need to have her play Vivian because she's amazing. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just love how that goes. That meeting. Like, baby doll, we got the script. It's really dark. People die and have heroin and stuff. Who should we have directed?
Right.
Garry Marshall. Didn't he do the Vine and Shirley? It is so tonally different from what we know him for.
Yes.
I find that funny.
Yes, we know him from TV's Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy. Then he went on to do Overboard in 87, Beaches, and
great film.
He had just finished Beaches before he did this one. And so it got Disney-fied. The script totally was changed. In fact, Jason Alexander, I believe, and Julia both told stories of they would kind of do what was on the script. Here's a perfect example. There's a scene where Edward comes in for a meeting and Jason looks down and he starts commenting on his shoes. Do you remember that scene? And kind of making fun of Edward for the type of shoes he's wearing.
Okay.
And so Jason said that Garry, and it's so hilarious because as I was doing research, Jason Alexander, Julia Roberts, and Richard Gere do an amazing Garry Marshall impression I am not going to do right now because I won't do it justice.
Oh, I can't do it well at all, but I think everyone wants to. There's something about Gary that just demands you impersonate
I think you
him.
spend time with him and you can probably do it better.
Right.
So maybe
Sure.
I should have
Practice.
spent prior to this podcast, instead of watching my reality shows, watching Garry Marshall interviews, and maybe I could have done it.
Fair enough.
But basically he calls Jason over and he says, comment about his shoes. Just kind of play around and comment about his shoes. So Jason's like, what? And he goes, yeah, trust me. So there was one line of dialogue from the script that Jason delivered, but then the most part he's just busting his balls about his shoes. And Gary goes, yep, cut, moving on. And Jason's just like, wait, what about the other lines in the script that we didn't say? And Gary was just like, it's okay, we've got it. And so all of them reported that he would do this. Julia said they would do a funny one, do a serious one, do an angry one. Okay, cut, moving on. And he was like, when we finished that movie, we were just like, there's no way a movie is going to be made.
Right.
We didn't get enough stuff.
Right. It was just a mismatch.
But Gary had it all in his head. And so I believe it was after the shoe one, Richard Gere said, see what I told you? Or something like, basically, he's a genius. Like, just listen to what he says and do what he says.
Okay.
And look, this is like an amazing movie.
After having spent 3 months editing, that causes me conniptions to think about. Just wow. I mean, what trust in your entire crew that you could do all these different takes and then there's one in there that you're going to be able to use to tell the story you need to tell.
Yep. So he compiles a cast of Richard Gere, Julia Roberts, Ralph Bellamy, Jason Alexander, Laura San Giacomo, Amy Yazbek, Hector Elizondo, and your aforementioned Larry Miller. Now, I mentioned Hector. It's so sweet. I believe Gary puts him in every movie.
I thought so, yeah.
And in this one, the budget didn't warrant, apparently, Hector's salary. And so Gary paid Hector's salary so that he could be in this movie. And he paid it out of his own pocket. And then eventually Disney relented and repaid Gary the money.
Oh, well, it was a good choice. I think this is a fantastic role for Hector.
Yeah, somebody, I can't remember who it was this morning when I was watching, I believe it was one of the producers, said every single person in this film is necessary. There is not one character. He says even the elevator operator is a necessary character for this film to propel it. Like, there's no wasted background. You know what I mean? I'm saying, like, there's no wasted, like, side carry, supporting cast. The DP was Charles Minsky. He did 86's The Hitcher, 95's Congo, and 2000's Almost Famous. It was filmed in and around all over Los Angeles. The Las Palmas Hotel, where Vivian lives, the Regent Beverly Wilshire, where she ends up staying with Edward. Rodeo Drive is a huge character in this. The LA Equestrian Center. And the Opera House is actually in the Natural History Museum. It's not in San Francisco because in '89 there was an earthquake and it blew out all the windows of probably the Davies Hall where they would have gone. On the USC campus, they used the Natural History Museum. The Biltmore Hotel and the W Hotel also were locations for filming. The synopsis of this film is: a man in a legal but hurtful business needs an escort for some social events and hires a beautiful prostitute he meets only to fall in love. Okay. That's the synopsis.
That's the synopsis, yeah.
Taglines are, who knew it was so much fun to be a hooker?
Ugh.
Yeah, that's a bad tagline. That is so bad. That is so bad. Okay. Or the other one is, she walked off the street into his life and stole his heart.
Okay, that's closer to Hooker with a Heart of Gold, but...
Yeah. Why don't you kick us off with a pickup line, and I'm going to give you some more facts and trivia about this film.
You know what they say, it's all about money. It's delivered by some random close-up magician at the party. I don't think we see their face.
No, we don't.
I felt like the voice sounded like Ricky Jay, and it could have been. It's just a rando, but I thought that was actually, it conforms to my theory.
Yeah, and this movie, I've heard a couple different thoughts. So right after the 80s, which was all about consumption and
Greed
Wall
is good.
Street and greed. And it's all about what you wear and what you drive and where you live. That's what makes who you are. And so we see that in Edward's life, that's all those people kind of care about, especially his horrible quote unquote friend Stucky, right?
Yeah. Why do you get the penthouse if you're afraid of heights? Because it's the best, right?
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about corporate rating. That's the business that Edward is in.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Horrible.
Well, and actually, you see that, right? The Bellamy character, it's fairly directly drawn where he's like, yeah, I don't care about me. I just care about the people that work for me. And then Philip Stuckey, played by Jason Alexander, who I can now not see George Costanza in the role, but that's not important right now. And he says, oh, yeah, don't worry about him. And just the way he says it, you're like, yeah, you're going to lay him all off tomorrow, right? You just know that's kind of, and I don't know if it's realistic. Edward's kind of face turn where he suddenly decides he's going to be a good guy. But boy, the audience, we bought it, right? We wanted the super rich corporate raider Carl Icahn to find a heart somewhere. It's like the Grinch, right? You want him to find a heart.
And when we first meet Edward and he's trying to explain to Vivian what he does for a living, he very much makes it sound almost, I don't know, like playing Legos or something. It's just like, well, I just buy these parts and then I take them apart and then I sell off the parts. And like, he's so very matter of fact that these corporations, he's devoid himself of the idea that these are people and lives and incomes that you're dealing with.
And I love Vivian's like, so you don't make anything, you don't do anything, you don't create anything? No. So yeah, it's a good point.
Versus her profession, which in this film, I'm going to say, in this film, not in reality,
right?
But in the bounds of this film, hers is, you could say, that very first night, she brings him comfort. She brings him entertainment. She brings him joy. And I'm talking about when they were just having like the carpet picnic.
Right. So yeah, I want to be clear that I don't believe that it is impossible for a sex worker to be a healthy human being doing like just a job for money. I think here in the United States, that's more difficult than some places. And certainly working on Hollywood Boulevard, I think most of those people probably have a lot of other traumas and things that don't really sustain that. But for the purposes of the film, right, by the premise, by the bit, yes, she is serving the escort role. And by that, I don't mean euphemistically for a sex worker. I mean, she was fulfilling that role of being someone who would, give him a companion and also, a certain, I guess you would say maybe appearance, or it checked the boxes for certain kinds of events. It would look weird, I guess, maybe to some people if he wasn't there with someone on his arm. And it's tough for me, and it has been since I first saw this film, that I like her character and the role her character plays, but I don't know how realistic that is for people in that industry in the United States right now.
And they try to show us some of the realism because the opening scene, I think before we even meet Vivian, we see that, I can't remember but a woman either jumps or is killed, or basically we know we're passing by a body, because in all the times I've watched this film.
Yeah, we never noticed this. This is amazing.
I never discovered that the detective is Hank Azaria.
Yes.
And I always saw the lady that's taking a picture as if it's part of, just kind of what you see in LA, and she's a tourist, and
right.
He goes, "Where are you from? The LA Times?" And she goes, "No, we're from Orlando." And that's Hank Azaria. I never ever.
And this is,
I love Hank Azaria.
I think this might be pre-Simpsons even.
Yeah, I bet this was because he was he is credited, but
he's credited,
but never like, and the film with Hank Azaria,
right?
Like, he's never.
But you're right. You have watched this many more times than I have, but I've seen this film many times myself, and I never once recognized him. Isn't that amazing?
So we do see that Skinny Marie died, and then Kit uses their rent money to go buy drugs. So they verge on the edge or the bubble of the negative side of it.
Right. And I think there's a recurring narrative plot line about how Edward is perhaps more of a prostitute than she is, in that he's only doing it for the money. He's not doing it for the love. Although I think prior to meeting him, she was not particularly in love with any of the people she took money from.
Right.
But that's not important right now. So it is, in that sense, it's problematic because I do like the film, but I worry that it maybe glamorizes something that's pretty tough lifestyle.
That's not glamorous at all. So a couple of little notes about acting and casting. Julia Roberts and Richard Gere were 18 years apart. They were 40 and 22 at the time of the filming. Actually, I know Julia was actually 20 because Garry, in between scenes, brought out a cake and she turned, or maybe she was 21 and she turned 22. That's maybe what it was.
That's why it sells one of our favorite lines in this film. He's not really my uncle. They never are, dear.
Yeah. I love that line. So here's a little bit of a total full circle that is pretty hilarious, I think.
All right.
For you and I and this film.
Okay.
So Garry Marshall reunited with Julia Roberts, Richard Gere, and Hector Elizondo, and Larry Miller, your favorite, in Runaway Bride, which included Joan Cusack, who you said famously after our first date that I maybe looked at and I took great offense because in my mind I was thinking 16 Candles Joan, not today's Joan.
Right.
And she, amongst many actresses, were considered for the role of Vivian.
Oh, wow.
Film. Isn't that like a crazy, like full circle moment?
Right. And it's also interesting because speaking of kind of for full circle or those connections, Larry Miller was considered for the role of George Costanza before Jason Alexander was cast.
Right. And Jason almost didn't make it getting cast in this movie because Garry didn't want him in it. He knew about the fight that was going to need to happen at the end. Right. And he said, not my words, these are Garry Marshall's words.
Yeah,
so
sorry, Mr. Alexander, that we're just reporting.
Oh no, Jason knows this story. I'm apologizing because it's an offensive. Garry said it would seem that Edward was beating up a midget during their fight scene. So he didn't like
Garry.
The height disparity. So the casting director put Alexander on a pile of phone books. And then when they were in similar shots, obviously probably Apple boxes. So
right. That's fascinating. I wouldn't have considered Jason Alexander short per se, but I mean, shorter than Jerry Seinfeld, but isn't Jerry a 6-footer?
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm sorry, Mr. Alexander. Apparently, you're shorter than I remember. Maybe he spends a lot of time on Apple boxes. I don't know.
This is a really tough role for Jason because his character, accosts Vivian. He said women walked up. Women have stared at him like daggers.
Hatred. Yeah.
Women have said, "I don't like you." He said one woman walked up to him in the airport and hit him. And then he's been spat on.
Oh.
I know. It's like people, it's just a role.
It's just a role. It wasn't like he said, I hit women in my spare time, so I'm qualified for this role. He's just an actor.
Right. I loved this Garry Marshall story. Richard Gere started off acting and he was being a little bit more active in his role, like I think gesturing and stuff. And Garry took him aside and said, no, Richard. In this movie, one of you moves and one of you doesn't. Guess which one you are.
That sounds like a Garry line.
I know, but not at all with like a New York accent.
Right,
like
but I love that. Guess which one you are.
I know. This was Ralph Bellamy's final film before he went on to the great beyond.
The Green Room in the Sky.
In 91 at the age of 87.
Which is, I think, again, a little bit of a movie connection because this could be considered a romantic comedy by many.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Ralph Bellamy is famous for originating the role of the Bellamy in romantic comedies.
What a beautiful bookend.
Yes, to his career. I wonder if he saw that irony.
No, this is definitely a romantic comedy. I mean, not only is it labeled as much, but that's...
Well, his love for her transforms him. Male and female gazes. I don't...
Oh, yeah. He
gazes at her when she's in the bar in the black cocktail dress. When does she gaze at him?
I think could it be after they've had sex and he's asleep and she's looking at him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's when she starts
Nope,
to
that's
fall
perfect.
in love.
That is a perfect assessment. Good job.
So I thought for cinematography, you would enjoy this little tidbit.
Tell me.
The night scenes were all shot practically mostly.
Oh, wow.
So there was so much lighting. Gary said they couldn't shut down. They didn't have the budget to shut down. What's the name of that? Wilshire Boulevard?
No. I don't know where they shot. Hollywood? Wilshire?
Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
Where's Grauman's? Do you
don't know?
Off the top of your head? So there was enough lights there. Plus there's just so much activity and so many people and they couldn't shut down. So they would add minimal lighting for the stars, nearby.
Yeah.
But then it was like kind of very run and gun in a way.
Yeah, it sounds like
So
it.
I wonder how many people, if you looked in the background,
right,
are really not background, but
they're
paid background,
pointing.
but just extras, people who happen to be there. And then when they shot the scenes on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills,
right,
you can, because those stores, they can't take a day off because they make so much money.
Sure.
And so a lot of those stores are closed on Sunday. And so they shot all those scenes on Sunday when you are allowed to get a permit. But basically, no permits are issued for Rodeo Drive Monday through Saturday.
Fascinating. Speaking of the cinematography in Hollywood, I noticed that kind of the opening shot was aerial shots of Hollywood. And this was before drones, so that was a helicopter shot.
Yes, it was. In fact, Gary talked about this because he is the one with the fear of heights. And so he gave that to Richard's character. And so for that helicopter shot, his son, and his son did I think the equestrian scenes, his son was basically the second unit director.
Is Gary also afraid of horses?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember why, but I remember him saying that his son did the equestrian.
He was tired. He just sent the boy out.
Yeah. I liked how she expressed her car knowledge to him.
Oh, yeah.
And then, and so he lets her drive and she's explaining how the pedals.
We can talk about that now or later. Your choice.
Okay. We can talk about that later. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Is there anything else while I'm looking at my writing notes that you liked since I've been doing a lot of talking?
This time around, I noticed a little bit more about plotting and the exposition. So 8 minutes into the film, we get it establishes her motive of why she needs cash so badly. I didn't remember that from previous viewings. It's kind of like, oh, well, she's at her day job, so she needs to get money. But she actually needs a lot of money because the rent is due, and Kit DeLuca, who is an addict, has spent their money on drugs. Also, there's a line there where Philip Stuckey at the party in the opening dialogue tells us basically what's going to go on. He's probably somewhere charming a very pretty lady. So that is a clever line of dialogue delivered before we even see Richard Gere's character that establishes that he's going to charm a very pretty lady throughout the remainder of the film. But I have to say there's a thing that just got to me. The polo match, and there's Dixieland jazz playing. That stuck out like a sore thumb to me. I do not believe rich upper crust polo people in Los Angeles would listen to Dixieland jazz. I think a string quartet, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Not even mariachi band, but Dixieland jazz. Wow. It struck me.
Interesting. I have no notes about that to help you out with that.
Okay.
I thought there were times, because a lot of people take issue. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. I have heard criticism of this film because of it being about sex work and kind of like his power dynamic. But I never noticed the many mentions of kind of him putting her in her place or reminding the audience or her of her station in life. So early on, he comments on the safety pin holding her boot up. He asks how much she makes and the idea of kind of that it's a transactional, which it is.
Right.
It's, but bringing up the money, he mentions that his first car is a limo and then he gets a penthouse because it's the best. So it's like he lives this life of consumption, and even though he would be more comfortable on a lower floor, he gets the penthouse because it's the best and it's the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
prestigious,
ostentatious kind of.
Okay.
And then she says, I slept so good, I forgot where I was when I woke up. And he says, oh, occupational hazard. So it's like he's constantly reminding her of what she does. And I never really noticed that. I thought they were just kind of funny lines instead of...
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely agree with that take on it. I would say there is definitely parts where he is teasing with some of these lines at some point near the end. But more importantly, that's how he deals with everyone. Like, I mean, that's the whole point of his character. His journey is going from that money is everything transactional. He sees a company as, oh, well, if I cut it apart, it's worth more money. So he doesn't see it having any intrinsic value of its own.
That's what I'm saying. Everything is a transaction to him.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That is true for most of the film.
And you're right. He is very charming. I think that's why Gary approached him and went to him. Like there's the scene where he says, or she says, you're late. And he quips, you're stunning. And she says, you're forgiven. And it's just sweet. Like you said,
the banter.
Kind of,
That reminded me a little bit of It Happened One Night with the speed, the pacing of how they deliver the dialogue. Mm-hmm. It was interesting, kind of related to the transactional part, but getting back to that great line, guess which one you are. Gere, as an actor, I know his face does show emotion, but in this film, he is very still. Mm-hmm. Not just his body, but his face, and emotionless. So I think that all kind of, to me, it was a great acting choice, I think, because it's of a piece. He seems like that heartless character.
Well, and yes, and I just saw in my notes later on in the film, and I think this is after, like, they take the bath together and so they have sex, and I think that's the first time that they kiss on the lips, which was it was a boundary that she set because to her that felt more intimate, and
right.
And so he says, you and I are similar. We both screw people for money. And once again, that was just another time where I felt like he was kind of like reminding the audience and her of who she is and comparing it to kind of like who he is.
Well, in that case, he's very directly saying they're the same.
And you brought up that he's cold. And if he was raised, like, let's say by governesses or whatever, and he was driving in limos, so like his mom's not driving him to school, the limo driver is. I think people tend to, I guess when you don't have like those touchy-feely people around you coming up, they're basically employees raising you.
Sure.
You probably do lack that emotional connection with human beings.
Yeah, yeah.
And you do view everything as like, oh, you're just my employee, my parents' employee or whatever.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunity for us to talk about costumes in this. The necklace that she wears when they go to the opera really it was real, and it was valued at $250,000. And so while they were filming, a security man from the jewelry store equipped with a gun was standing directly behind the director the whole time that scene was going on. The red coat that Vivian wears was bought for $30 from a movie usher in the street shortly before filming. So it's so funny because you just think of these, like we've watched all these BTS and different things, and the costume designers are pouring over and we see drawings and all this stuff. And then to find out that, oh, we need her to be a little more covered. Run in that movie theater and go buy the coat off the usher.
That guy looks good. Get his coat.
And then the off-the-shoulder gown that she wore while she went to the opera was originally supposed to be black, but the costume designer, Marilyn Vance, thought it was too boring and so made it red, which I think was a good call.
Yeah, because her hair, that's when we first see her red wavy hair is with that dress, because before then she had that Carol Channing wig on.
Right. And when he sees the wig, it's like, I felt like he looked at it and she's laying in bed and her hair is like tousled.
Yes.
And I felt like, I think we realized she looks better.
Yeah, that shot is classic Hollywood, gorgeous leading lady, like soft lighting. Oh my gosh. It's just like, she was very kind to the cinematographer apparently, but that was a great shot.
So anything else in costuming that you took note of?
Well, also the black dress I mentioned, the cocktail dress, and it looked like it had a little bit of a choker part to it. But I thought that, I don't know if this was that a callback because of the necktie? At one point she helps him with his tie, and then at another point she's wearing nothing but a necktie, waka waka. So I didn't know if that was, again, bringing that back. I noticed that Edward always wears a waistcoat, so he would be a 3-piece suit guy. And I don't follow fashion that well. In 90, would that be considered like a little stuffy, too conservative, like an old person? Or would that be considered a power move? I don't know. And my last thing was, at the end of the film, her last day at the Reach Bev-Will, she has this wondrous terracotta kind of short pantsuit thing going on, and the shoulder pads on that were gorgeous. Awesome work, costume department.
As far as sets go, it was great to see Hollywood Boulevard and the Tower Records because it's very iconic of LA. And I mentioned before that the opera took place in LA, not San Francisco, and it was La Traviata, about a prostitute who falls in love with a married man.
Wow, that. If I knew opera, there would have been an additional layer of interest there, but I don't know opera. And in there he says, like, you either love it or hate it the first time you hear it. And I would love to love opera, but watching it this time, I thought I would fall asleep. Sorry. But amazing performances vocally from the opera singers. That's no reflection on their talent.
And I have lots of notes for sound. So I told you as we were watching it that Richard Gere is actually playing the piano when she comes downstairs and sees him in the ballroom. And it's a piece that he composed. And you asked about the piano keys. And according to the director's commentary, the piano key sounds that are made during the lovemaking scene on the piano had to be dubbed in because the actual keys that were randomly hit by Julia and Richard made the scene sound like such a discordant sound that it was unusable in the actual movie.
Okay, I can see that.
One of several films in the 90s or in the 80s that were after a famous song played over the end credits, like Stand By Me, Stand and Deliver, Lean on Me, My Girl, and There Goes My Baby, were all in the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And then Pretty Woman. Because this one, originally they wanted the Van Halen version. I didn't know that they sang.
Yeah, David Lee Roth era. He did a Pretty Woman.
This same
song.
Okay.
They covered the Roy Orbison song.
So they wanted the Van Halen version, but couldn't get it for copyright. And so then they used the Roy Orbison song. And this movie has a great soundtrack. I love Roxette. It Must Have Been Love. King of Wishful Thinking by Go West. Show Me Your Soul by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Wild Women Do by Natalie Cole. I mean, it's just No Explanation by Peter Cetera. Like big 80s acts.
Yeah, I think this soundtrack was popular.
Yeah. All right. Any head trauma in this film?
Well, there's two famous bits of head trauma. Phil slaps Vivian upside the head in the penthouse, and then right after that, Edward punches Phil in the face.
So apparently in their tussle, Richard Gere got hurt because if you notice, he moves his tongue around the inside of his mouth right after him and Stuckey go to blows. And apparently he knocked a crown off the molar during that scene.
Right. So apparently Jason might be short, but he's got a good right hook.
He does. And then lots of smoochies between Edward and Vivian.
Smoochie, smoochie, smoochie. Yeah, lots of smoochies. In particular, what I think is noteworthy is she first kisses him on the lips while he is sleeping after he takes a day off for the first time in forever. And then, of course, the last smoochie when they're on the fire escape is noteworthy.
I love it. It's one of my very favorite lines of all films. He says, "What happens when he climbed up into the tower and rescued her?" And she says, "She rescued him right back."
Yeah, it's a good line.
I love it.
I don't think that was in the original Dark script, though.
No. The ending in the first script was she says she loves him. He says he doesn't love her. And he takes her back and drops her off, gives her the money. She's so hurt. She throws the money back in his face. He slaps her, kicks her out of the car. So she's dejected and broke again. And she goes up to her apartment where Kit is ODing.
Right. Happy Disney film.
Thank you, Garry Marshall.
Yeah, he turned it around for us.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. All right. How about a driving review?
Okay, so that silver 89 Lotus Esprit shows that Philip has both money and taste. If he just had money, he would have had some other car. But Lotus, he's obviously got taste. Okay, so I
can explain that.
Okay, explain away.
Filming commenced in 89, but was immediately plagued by countless problems, including issues with space and time. This included Ferrari and Porsche, who had declined the product placement opportunity of the car Edward drove. Because of this, they did not want to be associated with soliciting prostitutes. Lotus Cars UK saw the placement value with such a major feature film. This gamble paid off. Esprit sales tripled between 90 and 91, and the company supplied a silver 1989 .5 Esprit SE, which was later sold.
Yeah. So that's like a legit sports car. It's not necessarily for just a rich guy.
But it could have been a Ferrari or a Porsche.
Could have been.
They lost their chance.
But here's the problem. So there's a recurring bit that he's not so good with a manual. Okay, the Lotus is not a consumer car. Its clutch is going to have a really stiff bite.
Is it an H?
It is an H pattern, as she mentions. Although strictly speaking, an H pattern could be first top left, could be first bottom left. So that doesn't tell a whole lot. But he wouldn't have been able to drive it at all, or he would have been able to drive it perfectly. I mean, there's no in between. That car is way too much of a sports car for somebody who doesn't know. And with the noises they were mentioning,
the grinding gears.
Yeah, it doesn't have a synchro mesh transmission. He would not have been able to get anywhere if he couldn't drive it properly. Now, once she gets in there, mad props, because Vivian does not short shift, which is awesome. So credit to her. I'll give her that. It's a good car, and she actually drives it well. Or whoever they put behind the wheel. I don't know if that was Julia. If it was, very impressive. There's a shot there on when they go shopping on Rodeo Drive at first. And the car that they show driving through is a black 87 BMW 325i convertible. I don't think that would be impressive back then on Rodeo Drive. Not that it wasn't a nice car, but I just don't think that would be impressive. People of conspicuous consumption, that's more like the car you buy your daughter to go to college in. It wasn't that was a big deal. I thought of all the cars that you see in the background later, that was an odd shot for them to pick to say this was an expensive place. Bleh. But I thought it was very interesting because the hotel, the Reach Bev drives them around in a silver 84 Cadillac Fleetwood limousine. But earlier on, she mentions that she grew up around a lot of American muscle. So I thought that was a nice callback, a big GM vehicle. And for the people who lived through the late 80s, you'll notice through the rear window that winged cell phone antenna that was common for a few years there. And I remember people would buy just the antenna and mount it on their car. They had no cell phone, but they would mount it because it looked cool.
Because, yeah, it was important to look rich, right?
Yeah, back in the 80s, It was.
So it's interesting you bring up that silver limo because you mentioned after we watched this that you thought you remembered a continuity issue with the limo.
Yeah, at the very end.
And it makes sense because I told you as they were making this, Gary was making all kinds of decisions and changes. And so I think early on in the film, Silver was fine, but he realized that the ending that was written in the script wasn't a good ending. And he realized he was making a fable. And if he was making a fable, it needed to have a fairy tale ending.
And she mentions, I think, in dialogue, a white horse.
Yes. It's a dream, I believe, or a fantasy that she had when she was a kid, that the guy rides up on a white horse. And so he realized, I need Edward to ride up on a white horse. How can I do this in LA? And so it was the white limo. It's just unexplained why Gordon?
Yeah, the limo driver.
The limo driver drove the silver limo through the whole movie, but then, and so I feel like you could even say, you wouldn't have to explain it, but Edward's so rich, he remembers the story. And so he's like, Gordon, do you have access to a white limo, or get me a white limo? Like that. He has the funds to do that.
Well, sure. And if you have that service, you generally have more than one.
Yeah.
In case there's a mechanical failure. That part didn't specifically bump me because I think, there are many reasons that he could have a second limo.
Mm-hmm. And then apparently when Jason Alexander slams the door to his car, I'm imagining that's probably at the beginning when Edward's getting into it, when he's taking his car.
Yeah, must have been.
It actually broke the window.
Oh, yeah.
And so they had to replace it on that Lotus Esprit.
Yeah.
And here's one for you, sir. Have you ever heard of the Beverly Hills Speedway?
No.
I thought you would love this. This is why I do my research, so I can find these little tidbits for you. It also used to be called the Los Angeles Speedway. It was a 1.25 mile wooden board track for automobile racing in Beverly Hills, California. It was built in 1919 on 275 acres of land that includes the site of today's Beverly Wilshire Hotel.
That's awesome. They should rebuild it around the Beverly Wilshire.
And the former site is bounded by Wilshire Boulevard, South Beverly Drive, Olympic Boulevard, and Lasky Drive. The project was financed by a group of racers and businessmen that called itself the Beverly Hills Speedway Association. The track was the first in the United States to be designated with banked turns, incorporating an engineering solution known as a spiral easement.
It was wooden in 1919?
1919.
Yeah, speeds weren't terribly high, but I think it's a hoot.
I thought you would love that. That's thanks to Garry Marshall. He gave me that tidbit, and then I looked it up and just
Gary.
Read that paragraph from Wikipedia. Fun fact.
Love it.
Okay, so we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
Before we do that, I'm going to say for people who enjoy these adjusted for inflation, the offer of $3,000 would be $6,512.78 in July of 2021. And Vivian would earn just over $1,000 a day for the 6 days of work.
That seems like a decent wage for that individual.
Right. This film is the fourth highest grossing film of the year in the United States and Canada, and the third highest grossing worldwide. It had a budget of $14 million. The domestic take in the day was $178.4 million. Worldwide, it got $432.5. And adjusted for inflation today, the domestic would be $387.6 million. So kudos to those producers.
I hope Gary got points.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's why he kept working with Richard and Julia on Runaway Bride. And then I don't know if he was in Valentine's Day, but he worked with Julia again on Valentine's Day. It gets a 7.1 out of 10 from IMDb. Critics not as fond as I am of this film at 64%, and audiences actually not much more, 68. So I know I'm in the minority, but
I would dispute that. I think most people I know like this film.
I thought so too, but I have to recuse myself because I remember the theater. I remember walking in, like I was so excited to see this movie.
I'll be honest, I probably saw it for the first time on VHS.
That's fair. No shade to you.
Okay.
It's just under 2 hours at 1:59. It's rated R. It is a rom-com. It's a Touchstone Pictures. Julia was nominated for an Oscar, which is rare for a romantic comedy, for Best Actress. And not only did she get BAFTA noms, but so did costume design. And it got a nom for Best Film and Best Screenplay. It won the Golden Globe. Julia took home the Golden Globe for the film, and it was nominated for Best Picture. Richard Gere and Hector were also nominated as Best Actor in Supporting. It won a People's Choice Awards that year for Favorite Comedy Motion Picture. Julia also won the Golden Screen Award and the Jupiter Award for Best International Actress. So it got some kudos. We are kicking off this month with this theme. Write in and tell us what you think. We are also going to highlight a local charity that helps sex trafficked individuals as we speak of such films this month. So turn in your guess and then listen in and look in the show notes for how to contribute to Xpose Hope. But never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.